Okay, looks like those joining have started to taper off, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you, everybody, for joining today's webinar, The Ugly Truth About Records Management Tools. We appreciate you joining us today, and the first thing I'd like to do is just take a moment to introduce our speakers on the next slide. My name is Shana Horka, and I work in product marketing here at Gimmal. I am joined by our key speaker today, Gimmal client success expert and head of our implementation team, Colin Langston.
Afternoon, everybody.
And before we get started on the next slide, I have just a couple of housekeeping items to go through. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to submit them in the Q&A section on the bottom of your screen. We will answer as many as we have time for at the end of the presentation. There will be at least one poll question you will see pop up in a separate window, so please keep an eye out for that. All answers are anonymous to the crowd. And as always, if you have any technical difficulties, please let us know so we can assist you. This webinar will also be recorded for future viewing. So the next couple of slides, I have to just tell you a little bit about Gimmal and how we can help you take control of your information with our suite of solutions and expertise. Gimmal is an information governance software company that was founded in 2002. Our mission is to help you achieve your information governance goals by providing solutions that help balance the value your information provides with the risks it also presents. Whether you're trying to discover information in unstructured data sources, migrate from legacy systems, or comply with policies across multiple repositories, Gimmal can help you achieve your information governance goals. We have a client success team and a global network of partners that deliver solutions in conjunction with key partners like Microsoft and SAP. On the next slide, you'll see Gimmal's family of software products. They work together to help you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive solutions include migration from legacy systems, file analysis and e-discovery, electronic and physical records management, document management for SAP content. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and hand it to Colin so he can get started with today's presentation.
Thank you very much, Shanna. All right, so welcome everybody. Yes, I am the head of the implementation team as part of client success here at Gimmal. I've been working with this company for about 9.5 years now, primarily with their various records management solutions. And during that time, I've kind of figured out some things on a number of projects that were commonly present or commonly missing, depending on your view. Rethinking the title of this, The Ugly Truth may not be overly accurate. It might just be the truth about it that nobody wants to really present to you up front, because it basically implies a bit of extra work, but it's also necessary. The first thing I want to cover today is there's an idea of a silver bullet with regards to our records management tools. And so hopefully I can help dispel that and open everybody's thought process as to what's really needed. On projects in general, and then also specifically for records management implementations, what is it that we're actually doing if we boil it down? What are the goals that we're trying to accomplish, and what's needed to actually do that? And then just finally to wrap up with a general recommendation about how to keep it all together when you're on one of these projects. First, though, would like to have a quick poll from everybody just to find out where you are with regards to records management. Austin's going to present a poll to you in just a moment. Very basic question: have you implemented a records management tool? This could be either a third party, it could be some out-of-the-box solution, it could be a number of products that you've tried to combine together. And what were the results of that?
All right, the results are in. Colin, I don't know if you can see that on your screen, the results coming in.
Yes, I can. Okay, so looks like the majority of you have implemented successfully, followed closely by no, but you're planning to. Hopefully this presentation today will help you out a bit. And we We have a yes, but it was unsuccessful. If you're comfortable doing so, if you could put into the chat, I'd be interested in hearing why you believe it was unsuccessful. Maybe we could have the opportunity to take a second stab at that. All right, so let's move on here. So first thing we have is this idea of a silver bullet. And I use the jigsaw graphic here on purpose. So there's a not uncommon misperception about what the records management tool is going to do for you. Most of the time it is unspoken. I actually did have somebody tell me once that they thought the tool would do it all for them. And here's the thing, it won't. If we imagine a project or a records management project specifically as a jigsaw, where it's got a number of different pieces and components that either need to fit tightly together or just simply be assembled correctly. If we're relying on, oh, we've got the tool, that was the only thing we needed, this is like looking at a jigsaw where all you need is the 1,000th piece. The problem is you're ignoring pieces 1 through 999. And that piece by itself is not going to do you anything. This is not to be confused with a situation where there might be something proprietary or a piece that's highly specialized, or just that we just don't have the last piece yet, but we do have the rest of the puzzle already put together. So that's outside of the context of what I'm talking today. I'm talking about we just need this one thing and then we'll be good. It's almost along the same lines as I've bought the Wolfgang Puck line of cookware. Now I'm going to be a master chef. Well, you may think you are, but if you don't know how to fry an egg, I think the problem may be in your cooking skills, not with the equipment that you necessarily have. So when we're doing projects, and I'm going to relate this mostly to Gimmal records implementations and Compliance Suite, that's the two products with Gimmal that I've implemented the most. What is it that we're actually doing on these projects? Well, if we boil it down, we're answering three key questions. And if you can't answer any one of these, you're not going to be able to do records management. First question is, what is it? And we're asking this about any of the documents we're trying to manage. We have to be able to identify it. The second part is, what do we do with it? And both of these questions largely will be fueled by your retention schedule. If you don't have one or don't know what that is, you'll need to get one and find out. This is basically your instructions for records management. The retention schedule will have the identifications in it, but it's not going to tell you how to make those identifications. And this is where the last question comes in with, how do we know? When we look at a document in some digital repository, how do we know that it might be an invoice or a budget or a contract? We need to know that information going in. As far as the what do we do with it, we're going to get into this a bit more in a second. Your retention schedule, I've seen some that simply have numbers of years, 5 years, 10 years. Many of them do not say 5 years after what, which is a critical piece that you need to know. Just a random time period doesn't really tell you anything. And again, this comes back to, okay, it's 5 years after what? How do we know that? Is it because John down the hall just randomly said that's what he did? Or that's what he attributed to a certain document to identify it a particular way? Or is it an official policy that we use? And so we need to know those things. The tools that you use are not going to change the questions, but it may change the meaning of the answers. Going back to the what is it and how do we know? If you use the file name with a particular naming convention to identify your invoices and contracts, that's all well and good. Does the tool you're going to rely on have the ability to access that information? If yes, you're probably good to go. If not, you're going to have to do some more digging to find something that does enable that capability, or you may need to make some changes in your environment. And this is really what your tool is not going to do for you. It's not going to answer the questions. So what's needed? This is kind of general. Hopefully, obviously, this could easily apply to any type of project. Again, I'm staying in the context primarily of records management. So first one on the list here, although these are not meant to be in a particular order, we need a clear understanding of what the problem is and potentially why that's the problem. There have been a number of projects I've been on where it was expressed that we've got all these documents that we need to get rid of, and we haven't done so because we don't have the right tool to do so efficiently. After talking with them a little bit more, you find out that the real answer is nobody wants to delete anything. And that's something else that these tools are not going to do for you. We can have the most efficient, best configured solution of all, but if nobody's actually willing to take that step of, yes, go ahead, then the tools aren't going to do it for you. They're not going to do the deciding for you. They'll take the bulk of the work, but they're not going to actually make those decisions for you. At the other end of our project, hopefully, is our goals. And it's for both of these, it's important that we don't limit ourselves to just a high level bullet point of what each of them are. Oh, our problem is we have too many documents that nobody knows which one's the correct one. Okay, why is that? Let's get some more detail as to what's causing that problem. On our goals, what does success look like? Oh, well, we've just got a single copy of our documents. Is that really the goal? Maybe there's more to it than that. Maybe there's a user experience that we're looking for. Maybe success includes being able to easily find those documents, understanding where they are and how users interact with them. We also want to consider the context that we're working in. Are these steps and solutions that we're trying to put in place, do they involve other people, other systems, other applications? Do they need to be integrated with them or simply interact with them? It might be the case that there is a tight integration between two systems and one uses the output of the other. It may also simply be that one generates documents, properties, etc., and then we just ingest that information wherever it is, and it never really mattered how it was generated in the first place. It's important to understand what we actually have to deal with because it's going to require different levels of expertise, potentially different personnel that we want to make sure are all on the same page so that they also understand the problem that we're trying to solve and how we're going about it for our ultimate goal. Last and certainly not least, we need the right tools for the job. And this definitely relates back to the previous slide with the how do we know. I've been on several projects where they were dealing with documents in file shares, and we needed to be able to identify them as certain types of records. With a file share, you're basically limited to the file name and your folder hierarchy that it's in. If that's got a structure to it, you're fairly well off to start. However, in many cases, that doesn't exist because end users were not building the folder structure with that in mind. And so the proposed solution is, well, let's look at the body of the document. We do have a tool, Gimmal Discover, that can absolutely parse that content and then apply an identifying label, which Gimmal Records can then make use of to apply retention to those documents. But, and this goes back to that silver bullet myth, what it doesn't do is tell you what those identifying characteristics should be. That's something that you need to look at and determine. And so it's important to know that going in and understand what that actually means and what you would have to do. Next up here, basically just some ideas that we need to be aware of with records management implementations. So again, this is referring primarily to Gimmal records, but it could be any of them really. And these are things that I have found to be missing, not every time, but enough that it's kind of alarming. And I feel that people should know what is really required here. The business users are absolutely going to be affected by what we're doing in records management. Basic example of this is if we lock down a contract while it's in mid-editing mode, that's not going to do anybody any good. It's going to cause a lot of heartache because now our contract that's still being written has been made immutable. So we need to take into account the business users and what they're doing. And shock of shock and horror of horrors, this is going to require actually talking to them. Our ultimate goal is to reduce the work that is required of them. If we fail that, we want to make sure we do no worse than maintain the work level. But if we end up increasing their work level, then my personal belief is that we failed. We want to make sure that we reduce that. By talking to them, we can understand what their business processes are, what they need to do with their documents, and then we can incorporate that on the records management side so that we're not stepping on their toes. At the same time, they may be able to change their work processes slightly, both to accommodate the records management requirements, as well as potentially make their work processes more efficient and less labor intensive. When we present that, I've never come across any users who pushed back on being less labor intensive. And this goes back to the second foundational question, what do we do with it? Your actual configuration may not match exactly the retention schedule. And the reason for that is we have different steps to accommodate our business users and what they need to do. The other piece that I've seen kind of missed is what other pieces or components do we need to configure? Are we managing documents in multiple repositories, whether that's file shares, SharePoint, Documentum, etc.? Each of those needs to be considered, even though the retention specification from our schedule is the same. We may need a different configuration to allow for the different organizations within those three disparate systems. Ultimately, whatever decisions we come up with, we need to apply them, obviously, and then we come up with our fully rounded out solution. And we can actually test the success of it. We need to establish that goal criteria and understand what success looks like in our ultimate solution so we can demonstrate a finish line. Throughout this project, this type of project, and just about any others, we're all familiar with the idea of missing the forest for the trees, where we're so focused on the details that we miss the big picture. This is a case where we actually need to keep an eye on both. We need to keep that big picture in mind while being able to focus on individual trees. Some of them will require more attention than others. Some need to interact with each other. Some simply need to coexist peacefully. But you do need to be able to look at it all at once and at the same time. So that's basically what I wanted to talk to you about today. Just as a quick recap, we've got this idea of a silver bullet where the tool's going to do it for me. Unfortunately, it's not going to do your thinking for you. You still have to make the decision. What the tool will do is make that decision repeatedly for you once you've given it the decision criteria. But coming up with that criteria is something that we need. What are we doing? But basically, it boils down to these three foundational questions again. What is it? What do we do with it? And how do we know that? In order to be successful, we need to have a clear understanding of the problem and goals, as well as the context we're operating in and the tools that we have available and what criteria, what capability those tools might have. With regards to records management specifically, we really need to incorporate our business users into the process so that they don't get caught off guard, and that so we can also make sure that we allow for the work that they do. If it wasn't for them, records managers wouldn't really have a job, and vice versa. And ultimately, we need to make sure we keep it all together, keep it all in view at the same time so that we don't lose focused by being hyper focused. That is what I have. Shane, I believe I'm going to hand it back over to you. We have one last poll question here.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see the poll question pop up on the screen. Again, Colin is part of our implementation team, and he's also, been on our client success team for how long, Colin? Years of expertise here.
Almost a full decade.
Wow. If you would like more information on any of the solutions he may have mentioned, or to talk through, those that may have had failed or looking into records management tools, go ahead and hit yes on the poll that you'll see pop up. Or, maybe now's not the time, then there is a no, not at this time option. I would like to remind everyone we do have a couple of questions in the chat. We allotted a good amount of time for Q&A. If you can think of any questions, now would be the time to go ahead and submit them. But we'll go ahead and get started, Colin, if you don't mind. So the first question we have is, how do I determine resources on my end?
So this is a very good question. It's also quite open. The very simplistic answer is it depends. It can be hard to tell and a bit daunting to try and figure this out. What you start with is, what do I need to do? And do I have the expertise or the authorization to do that myself? If not, who does, or who knows who does? And that's your next set of questions. It really depends on how some of these responsibilities are delegated at your particular company. Different places do it different ways. They might have a specific team for their database systems. They might have another team for managing file shares, yet another for SharePoint Online, yet another for installing software. So we can certainly help identify some of those that you might need to talk to, at least insofar as, hey, we're going to need some SharePoint work here. Is that you folks, or is that another team at your company? But we can certainly help sort that out. Usually it just involves a discussion of what it is that you want to do.
Great. The next question we have is, what are your observations on how to successfully engage clients?
Really, it's been actually talking to them, not at them. And basically, I have this presentation as a conversation with them. Here's what it is that you're actually trying to do. And I teach them a little bit about how the tool, in this case, Gimmal Records, actually works and what it needs to work. There's been a few cases where we get in, they say, oh, okay, fantastic, that's great. Others, and thankfully it's the rarity, where suddenly it's like the clouds have been lifted and it suddenly dawns on them what they're going to have to do. So generally I just talk to them about, and I need to have an understanding of how the tool itself works also in order to be able to have that conversation with them. You've got this retention schedule. Okay, when I go and look at that document, I need to tell the software how to decide that it's an invoice. What is that criteria? If you can't tell me that, then we can't tell the software that. And that really is what it boils down to.
Great. And the next question we have is, do most electronic records management systems encompass multiple tools linked together? For example, SharePoint and Gimmal and Alfresco and G Suite.
Those specifically, I don't know. I would say many of the projects I've either worked on or known people who worked on, colleagues of mine would have been on them. Yes, absolutely. Multiple different repositories are involved. And so there needs to be some consideration as to how those documents, we may have an invoice in Documentum, an invoice in G Suite, SharePoint Online. How do we identify it as such in each of those systems? And does whatever tool we use have the ability to access that information?
Right. And the last one, unless we have more sneak in, what is a realistic approach to applying policy across record repositories, knowing that some tools are great, but sometimes are not that magic bullet?
You need, well, trying to give a good answer and not just a pie in the sky summary. So you do need to be realistic with yourself and be able to answer those three questions. What is it? What do I do with it? How do I know? Start there. And then once you're able to answer those, that's when you start looking at your tools and do they have the capabilities that you actually need? Okay, this goes into the what do I need to do with it? Do we need destruction certificates? If so, what format do they require? What information is needed in them? Do we need to be able to require approval on the disposition of these things? What sort of customizability do we need? Asking for a demo of products and, just be honest with whoever's leading the demo with what it is that you need or don't need is a great way to start.
Great. And Colin, if actually you could go to the next slide. I didn't realize we didn't have our contact information up there.
I apologize.
So that is the last question, unless another one can sneak in. If anyone has any more questions you can think of, feel free to email either Colin or myself. It's just our names at gimmal.com. And then we'll get the answer. If we don't have it, we'll get the answer to you. If our names are too hard to remember, if you could go to the next slide, Colin, you could also email us at info@gimmal.com or visit our website at www.gimmal.com. For those of you who are interested in the recording of this webinar, we will be sending it out between 24 and 48 hours in the form of a thank you email. So please keep an eye out for that. It'll also be located on our website if you don't see an email come through. And we hope to see you on our webinar next week titled Physical Records Management, Thing of the Past. But with that, thank you, Colin, and thank you everybody for joining. We hope you have a great rest of your day.
You're very welcome. Thank you, everybody.